Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, where faith, community, and ministry intersect in the unique context of smaller congregations. I'm your host, Tony Marr, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two men who are convinced they're a little bit more talented than I am.
That is right. I'm Robert Kell, one of those supposedly more talented guys, co-host and fellow small church leader. Together, we're here to explore the challenges, triumphs, and inspiring stories within the tight-knit communities that make up our smaller churches.
And I'm Bruce Montgomery, the one here to bring even more to the table than these two and offer a unique perspective to our conversation.
So whether you believe this talent hierarchy or not, you're in for a treat. If you're a pastor, a church member, or just curious about the world of leadership, you're in the right place.
Each episode, we dive into topics that matter to you, from innovative ministry ideas to navigating the unique dynamics of a smaller congregation.
So grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's journey together through the wonderful tapestry of small church life.
This is the Small Church Podcast.
Well, welcome back into another edition of the Small Church Podcast. I'm Tony Marr, and I'm here with my good friend, Robert Kell. And Robert, it's been a week for you.
It has been. And so I'm going to try not to cough through the thing as well. I think in this week it's been there. I think you just said I had some stuff going on last week, which I'm so pumped to hear. I need to go in and listen to you and your kids talking, and I have not heard that yet. But I guess it was, we record this and we timestamp a few things, but we record this on Wednesday mornings. And so the Tuesday of the week before this, I'd gotten a text message from my sister about 4:00 and said, hey, our uncle had passed away. And so my mom is the oldest of 5 siblings. The youngest is another girl. So it's my mom, 3 boys, another girl, and her husband had passed away. And it's just crazy. We were standing, talking and staying with my cousins, and 2 of his grandkids were there, and they're teenagers. They're like 16, 17. They're a hoot. They're really, really funny. And they were like, Papa was a criminal and his son's a cop. And so my cousin's a state trooper, and my uncle was not a criminal, but he liked to drive very, very fast. And I mean, he actually, in his funeral processional, they drove his 60, it was a Mercury Comet that he had fixed up, and he had a 62 Ford truck. That Comet had a roll cage, a tachometer. I mean, it was just a street car. He wasn't even racing it anymore. I mean, so he was absolutely a hoot. I've known him my whole life. As a mechanic, he raced cars on dirt tracks and things like that. I've stood in the pits on the weekends with him and another uncle of mine who raced cars and things like that. These things about 12, literally almost to the minute, 12 hours after he passed away, my mom passed away. And so it was just this weird, so like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., we get this phone call that they'd found my mom unresponsive. She was in a rehab facility, had not been feeling well for a few months, and she'd been there about 75 days. And Melissa and I were talking yesterday, and mom was in the hospital for a couple weeks before that. And so it was just this weird space. And I knew mom wasn't doing well. And, I say things and people can think more or less of me however they want to in this. I don't care. But, our oldest son spent all summer in Colorado, Texas, New Mexico, leading worship and doing things. And he and I just had some real intimate conversations. And I just said, hey, Nana's not doing well. And there's a real chance while you're gone that she may not be here when you get home. And if you need to come home for closure or to be a part, we will, whatever plane ticket, pick you up, whatever needs to happen, we will get you here. But mom had been sick for a while. Mama got cancer in 2017 and had just physically gotten to a place after that point that she had a lung disease, and she'd just gone through some things and gotten to this place of, she was on oxygen all the time. Her physically just wasn't able to do as much. And so between the cancer that she had, then was in remission, it came back, she was in remission again. And then the lung disease that just progressively got worse. I had dealt with a lot of things in my heart. And as a pastor, I think we do that sometimes. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm some deep down narcissist that I'm learning things about myself or something. But, I had sat with mom and we'd had so many talks, and it was just this, the space that my heart was okay with the fact of where her health was. It was either getting ready to be a really hard struggle for her or a lot of peace. And I'm thankful for the peace, minus God touching and healing. And we prayed for that. And we prayed that God would touch and heal and work and do. And he chose to heal her on the other side of this thing. So, that was a real beautiful thing for us. But yeah, so we've had a long week. We had 2 funerals on Friday, and then my niece, my youngest sister's daughter, got married on Saturday. So instead of 2 weddings and a funeral, we had 2 funerals and a wedding, and it was an absolute blur of 4 days. And then
you jumped right into teaching on Sunday.
I did. I preached on Sunday, and you and I were talking, and I guess I just didn't think about it. And the one thing I said, and I had a couple of friends, you of course, not immediately. You spent probably the first 12 hours taking care of me and Melissa and investing in that space, and super thankful, because as pastors, we don't have pastors a lot of times. And you didn't assume that role. It was very much a friend, but there was this pastoring, shepherding part of what you were doing that I greatly needed in that time. But I think too, I just, like several other people who were on our teaching team, people who were leadership at the church, they'd walk in and be like, "Oh, you're here." And I'm going, I didn't know where else to be. And the thing that I said on Sunday is when I did the welcome, I just said, "Hey, a lot of you know this. You have texted, you have called. Hundreds of you have interacted with us on social media and done things. And it was so personal and so just intimate for us. And it helped in this journey." But Mom was never prouder, outside of me being her son, of anything I ever did outside of pastoring. And there is nowhere I could have imagined being on Sunday. And I said, so I'm going to do my best to be faithful to what I think Mom would want. And that's why I said what I said to my son, is I was like, there is nowhere Nana would rather you be than serving and being a part of leading people towards Jesus. And so I think in that space, I just didn't know what else to do or where else to sit or where else to be. And then maybe selfishly, we started a new series that is just about our values. And so we were talking about community, and I'm so passionate about that. And I just, and I kind of said, like, and I hope it wasn't off color and things when I said it, and our live stream didn't work, so nobody can go check it out and see. But, I just kind of said maybe my illustrations weren't good enough and God needed me to have something better. But you all have shown like community. And I know a lot of, and I said, a lot of you have texted and you have said things, but there is an intimate group of people that I live life with. When you think about Jesus had the 3, he had the 12, he had that 60, 70 to 150 range. And then he had the mountainsides when he was on the side of a hill and he's teaching to, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people of they're sitting there. My 3 and 12 showed up and like straight showed out. And there was a lot of people in that 150, which if you listen to psychologists and say is about the largest number of people we can really know and care for. Which is why I love the fact that our church is under that 150 size. I think it's a space that we create community in a different way. And why as soon as we get to 150, maybe a little over that, we will send out a group of people to go launch something else for a group of 150 to get to that. But that 3 to 12 just showed up for us so much. I could have never had that. I could have never given that analogy in that space. And so I know that's not why God did that and why Mom's not here. But man, I just sat in some spaces where I was just really cared for. And a lot of it came from the fact of people that I've sat in pretty small rooms with. I've opened up the scriptures with. I've been able to be there for them in some times that are hard. Somebody in my small group right now, granddad passed away yesterday. And so she and her dad, and my phone keeps buzzing like crazy because I tried to call her husband this morning, just wanting to check on them. And that's just what community is and where it sits. And so that Sunday was pretty special to me because I really believe in community and I had experienced it so much. So yeah, that was hard couple days. I think I was telling you, I guess it's the first time I think I've been pretty I don't think I've missed an episode. I think I've been full time with the show since about a year ago. Yeah. And I this is the first Wednesday morning I've driven here that I haven't talked to my mom. And so there's some moments and some things that I know what's coming down the road. We still got, getting the cable cut off and cleaning out houses and all those types of things and stuff. And I've got 2 sisters and their families that will journey through that very well with me and my wife and our kids and things. And so there's some grieving and stuff that I know is coming. And I'm not putting that off. It'll happen when it happens. Today was a little bit of a hit, but yeah. So, if you heard randomly, hey, Robert's got some personal stuff going on and you were praying for us, thank you. It was felt. And if you're listening to this now and going, wow, Robert is special. And by special, I don't mean like he's really cool. Robert's weird. I am. And I just don't, I've told my mom all the time, you can't ask me to believe this Bible stuff and then be mad when I do. And to be absent from this body is to be present with the Lord. Paul just talks so much about this place is not our home, that we are passing through and like we are, destined for something greater. And so, doesn't make grieving easy. It's definitely a part. And, but I'm really thankful to have had the parents that I've had. We lost them both in about, Dad passed away in 2020. Mom 20 was about 4.5 years. Kind of a weird, we lost Dad during COVID, which feels like 10 years ago and 10 minutes ago. And so it's about 4.5 years, and it's just been a special journey. Had good parents that loved me well, probably better than I deserved most of the time, and I'm thankful to be able to sit in some spaces and continue to hopefully respect and honor them as I get to love and care for my 3 boys and my sisters as being the oldest and stuff. And they don't need me to do that, but I feel kind of a responsibility of just, how do I care for, love, and move along them. They're both smarter and prettier and wiser than me in so many ways. So I'm hoping I can just love them special stuff. So anyway, yeah,
we're gonna kind of go off the script for a minute, if that's okay with you.
Go for it.
And this is not at all what we planned today, but just listening to you talk there. And I asked you before we hit record, how much of this do you want to talk about today?
Yeah,
and I was fully prepared. If you said, let's just not even address it at all. Last week you were gone. That's it. Dealt with. You're back. But you opened it. You said you're open to talking a little bit about this with our listeners. My concern, and something that I think is really applicable to our audience, is you went from 2 funerals on Friday, a wedding on Saturday, teaching on Sunday. I wasn't able to be.
Yeah, you were teaching another church.
I was teaching another church, which in all honesty, I sent you a message and saying, hey, what can we do to help you if you need someone to step in and teach for you this weekend so you can have some time? And about 30 minutes after I sent that, I was like, oh no, I'm teaching somewhere Sunday. I hope he doesn't come back and say yes. If so, I've got to figure something out for this other church because I'm stepping in for Robert. But Amanda said that my wife went to church with you guys on Sunday and said that you did an absolutely phenomenal job. And then we were talking and I said, I hope that he was able to just go home and rest. And she said, well, actually, I think they were leaving straight from there to go to soccer and spend the whole rest of the afternoon.
I did not go to soccer. We went home. Brody had a soccer match and Melissa said, hey, and I was like, I can't do it. I literally was driving home. And I literally almost pulled over. And for some of you that don't know, I mean, it's about an 18 to 22 minute drive, depending upon traffic lights in a couple of spots, for me to get from my house driveway to the church. And I got about halfway home and I thought I'm gonna have to pull over and let my youngest son drive. Like I was done. It was like, so we got home. Then I kind of caught a second wind. And about the time they were leaving, I was like, my son's playing pickup soccer with adults. It's not like he's playing, some big monstrous tournament. He's still in high school, plays these adult leagues, and we go watch him every week because he won't play forever. And we enjoy getting outside and just taking the dog and sitting and doing. And so I said, hey, I'm going to hang at home. And they got out. House got kind of quiet. I think Landon was playing guitar kind of back the hall, and I kind of hear this vague guitar, and and I was out. And so I did pass out for about 2 hours, and it was very much needed. Good. So, yeah. So yeah, I did get a little bit of rest. But
so you got a little bit
much.
of rest, but then Monday morning you jumped right back into it.
I had to be, here's what's funny. I had to be at work at 6 a.m. Monday because we rent out our facility to to anybody really just about in our town. But we've got this one organization, this one pretty big company in our town that they rent it out, and they're renting it out for 2 weeks. And so their first day was Monday, and they're like, hey, we need to get set up. And I didn't do any of the booking. Because mom had passed away, somebody else took care of it. And it just left a ton of gaps in my brain. I was like, man, I wish they would have just called me. I could spend 10 minutes on the phone and been way more at ease. And so, yeah, I got over there and did all of that, worked till about noon at the office, rushed home, ate some lunch, and then went out for another meeting and got home at like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
So you go from this crazy weekend, crazy week, because it started for you on Tuesday, you said, dealing with all this stuff and having to step in as the oldest son, and you're stepping in and dealing with all these things, all these arrangements, all this stuff to take care of, all these details to address. And then you've also got a family to take care of. You've got 3 boys and a wife who are also grieving the loss of a grandmother and a mother-in-law. And then you're into a crazy day on Monday, crazy day on Tuesday. Now you're sitting here on Wednesday doing a podcast to start your day. You just said that you've got another family in your church that's going through some grief stuff, and you're reaching out to them and helping them through their grief. Robert, when is your opportunity to just stop and breathe and feel a little bit?
I think one of the things for me that's been a little different with this is, mom, like I said, mom before she passed had been out of her house. Mom has not been in her home for over 100 days. And as things progressively got worse emotionally, I was dealing with things, and, so that Monday I came home, ate dinner, and then thankfully I do stuff on computers and I do design work and things like that. And I'm designing this project for this company, as a side thing. And so I spent 4 hours in a recliner watching movies with my oldest son, just hanging out and things. And so it was probably 11 or so before I went to bed. I did get to play golf yesterday morning, and a week or two ago I had, booked this golf thing with one of our other campus pastors. And so I knew at least 2 of my boys were going. And so it was me and JB and these other 2 of my 2 sons. And I told Mel as I was leaving that morning, I said, when we booked this, it was just a day. It was just me and a buddy hanging out, taking the boys, going to hit a golf ball. It's a little par 3 course, that I play a bunch. And I texted him later and I just said, man, when we booked this was just me and you, buddies hanging out, having a good time doing something we love. And I was like, you have no clue. Like, it was the slowest. We played 9 holes on a par 3 course and it took over 2 hours. It was the slowest round of golf I have ever played in my life. But it was just a slow, methodical. I don't remember any shot I hit. I remember just laughing and having some fun, hanging out with my boys. Me and one of my sons played JB, and one of the other ones just kind of a captain's choice thing. We lost. I could not hit a shot. I do remember I didn't play well, but it was just one of these things of like that space. And so I'm taking some moments. I've got a meeting today after this is over, and it's with the campus pastors. And when one of the campus pastors texted, nothing disrespectful to me, they texted the thread and said, hey, is this our Wednesday to meet? And immediately our lead pastor said, if Robert's available. This was 6 days ago. And he was just like, if Robert's available, we will meet, but we need to keep in his schedule. And so there's been no pressure on me. I needed some space to kind of get away and do some things, and just, there's some work that's got to get done, but I've not felt any pressure to step into these spaces. And so, it's, But
if you're like me, I don't like emotion. Okay. I don't like to feel emotion. And so when there are things happening, I busy myself to try to distract myself from the emotion. And I think that as pastors, we do that a lot, that we care for the needs of others so much that when we have needs, we tend to not know how to react to that. I'm so used to being the strong one. And I'm saying this blanket, not just for me, even though it's true for me, that we feel so used. Our role is to be the strong one, to carry other people through their grief, that when we are hit with a situation that so often we don't know how to accept grief ourselves and then do the self-care. We've spent 4 weeks talking about self-care, and so it's very timely, I think, to kind of wrap it all up, that I think it's something that pastors don't do very well.
No, I agree. And I love emotion, and I will feel them all. I have no problem laughing, crying, being angry, being joyful. I will work through all of those things. And I think that has been something like last night, and I don't even know that anybody, Mel listens to the podcast, so she'll hear this and be like, oh, I didn't even know that. But she was getting a shower, and the boys were back. Landon's always writing music, playing guitar. The other boys were probably playing video games, doing something, and I was sitting there, and I was just like, I just walked outside. I try and get just barefoot on the ground 5-10 minutes a day. I don't, nothing mystical or anything about it. I just think there's something too grounding, and like our body's connecting with the earth, and God gave us this space, and there's some things that medically I think are good there. And I was just like, I haven't done this in a few days. I'm feeling it a little bit in my life. And I just kind of got outside, and there was some cool clouds, and I just literally stood in our front yard. I didn't do anything. There was some definite kind of these exhale moments of, these are moments that I call mom. And just to check on her, just to say, hey, I literally, our last conversation was 1 minute and 38 seconds, Tuesday morning. I'm trying to think, 10 a.m. Tuesday morning before she passed away, 4 a.m. Wednesday morning. And it was just, I'm tired. I can't, I just can't right now. Let's talk later. And so in that space, there's so much that's got to get done. I really think for me, the harder hit is going to be Thanksgiving. It's going to be Christmas. And I even still walk by, and I don't think you have an Alexa sitting in here or anything. I didn't want to say anything, and it kind of started going off and yelling in our machine. But we have an Amazon Echo, the big screen that kind of sits in our kitchen, and there's pictures of my dad that'll pop up, moments with him, me, and my kids, and things like that. And I'll just stop and kind of watch a few kind of flicker through. And sometimes I'll mumble words out loud at him. Sometimes I'll just kind of say things that I know he can't hear if I'm internally. I think that Scripture teaches, that after people pass away, they are at least partially aware of what's happening on this earth. And so I don't know what that partial is sometimes. So, but no, I'm crazy thankful for those spaces, and I'll take some time on Friday. I know you and I might sit down for a few minutes, but that's different for me. Friday's my day off, and I may get out and just go by myself and hit some golf balls or do something. And if one of the boys wants to go, that's different than some things there, but we'll work through some of those things and that. But no, I agree. But I don't mind feeling emotion. I'm a pretty emotional person, and I'm kind of stepping in these spaces a little bit at a time, and it's going to come to me in small moments because my mind's so active on other things that it doesn't slow down regardless. So I'm going to, when it does stop and I'm feeling that stuff, I'm giving myself the space. Like I said, I'm going to walk outside, and I'm just going to reflect in. And I'm going to kind of sit in that space for 2, 3, 4 minutes, and then somebody's going to yell, somebody's going to call, and I'll step back into life there. But yeah.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. You have a much healthier grip on your life than I do. I know we both lost our dads right about the same time.
Yeah, we didn't really know each other at that point in time
passing.
in life. Yeah.
And my dad was my best friend. My dad was more than just a dad to me. He was my best friend. We talked multiple times a day. and his passing was not expected. My parents were on vacation, and we got a call from my mom at 10:30 on a Wednesday night and said, "Hey, something's happened with your dad. We're rushing him to the emergency room." And she said, "I'll let you know later." And we said, "No, we're getting in the car and driving to Charleston, South Carolina." And by the time we got there, he was gone. And it was, I mean, that was 4.5 years ago. And I have voice messages from my dad on my phone that I haven't gone back and listened to because I can't bring myself to do it. Anytime my mom tries to bring up a story of my dad, I quickly try to change the subject, because as soon as I can start to feel that emotion coming, I suppress it. I try to hide it. And that's not healthy. I know that's not healthy. And you can only suppress it for so long before it's going to explode. And Amanda, my wife, I think is inevitably waiting for that explosion and what it happens. And it's something that probably need to be working through with my counselor, with my therapist, on how do I deal with all this. But I see that with a lot of guys that are like us, and that we're just not good at that. And so it's good to hear that you enjoy that. I wouldn't say you enjoy it. You welcome it. You welcome it.
You know, and I've talked so much. I don't remember what I said, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Friday, we did 10 a.m. a graveside for my mom, and then a church where she and her family attended, did this lunch for me, my sisters, my aunts and uncles, cousins, like 50, 60 of us. And it was amazing. And literally we sat and we laughed and we told stories. And and we would talk about the fact of my cousin was like, I remember when Carolyn was walking up one Christmas and got to the front door and she slipped on a board because there was ice and she fell right in front of the house. And I was like, I yelled back to Mom, which is my mom's sister. And she's like, and I was like, Carolyn just fell. And all we heard was this cackle laughing. And my aunt was just losing her mind laughing. And we all sat and just in a circle, just telling these stories and sitting in. And so I really enjoy that space. I love those moments, and I'm okay kind of laughing through and in that space. We spent about an hour at my mom's viewing, just me, my sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, their kids. And we got to the end about that hour, and one of my sisters came and said, "Hey, do you want to just say something, pray? And people don't have to leave, but if they want to, they can." And I said, "Sure." And I got up there and I just looked out and I saw, my three uncles and my aunt, who are my mom's siblings. And all I could say was, man, she loved you all so much. And I sat with the second oldest, the next day for about an hour. Hour and a half. We sat around his dining room table. And he had this, we went to his house, and his son, my cousin, was taking his 57 Chevy. He's got this gorgeous 57 Chevy that he's restored. And they've got this, 68 Chevy pickup that they're getting ready to work on and do and things like that. And we just sat around, and he said, your mom's the one who, he said, Carolyn's the one who called and told me about Henry, about my uncle. And, Henry and Roger, both kind of later in life, both retired. They worked on cars. They went to car shows, and he's just like, I lost the only two people that ever spoke to me outside of my kids. And I just sat there, and I mean, in that space and in that moment, after all the laughing and all the stuff, but standing there with my family at the funeral home that night, I think it's the only time I really, I had a lot of visible emotion. The guy who did the service, did my dad's service, and literally I have known Mike for, my entire life. Unbelievable guy. And a great pastor, great singer and musician. And he sang and spoke, and he had so many. My dad gave Mike his first job. And so he gave so many personal stories about mom and dad and churches that they had served in and all these things throughout the years. And that was emotional. And I could sit there and kind of feel that and feel what was going on there and just be thankful for that space. But
So yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. It's hard. And for me, I love the stories. It's like, tell me something else. Tell me something I don't know. Tell me something about my parents that they were trying to hide. Like I was sitting with my cousins and we were just talking about stupid things we did driving. And we were talking about driving our cars too fast and things. And I really have, I mean, everybody speeds. But when I say speed, like a speed that seems ridiculous, I have done one time and I have no clue. I was driving this 90 Ford F-150 and it went to 85 and the needle was back at overdrive under. So it's almost back down directly. I have no clue. And at that point I was like, I need to let off this thing. And I have no clue. Like, and we were just sitting there laughing, telling these stories. And I remember sitting there going, man, I hope mom can't hear this. I'm like, I'm sure there's better things going on in heaven than hearing my story. But I was like, man, I hope mom doesn't hear that. I was like, sorry. And probably should have said that story there. At least waited a couple of days. And so we just had these spaces and moments of that. And it was really special to get to pray with my family and to get to really kind of share that and just, man, my mom loved her family so much. And that's something that I treasured. And then, I just told you right before, being a pastor sucks sometimes. I don't know if I can say that on this show, but,
now we have to put the explicit content.
Yeah. Explicit content. Sorry. It's just hard because I don't know what, people listening, I don't know what your churches do or don't do, but we do Christmas Eve services and I love them. It's actually one of my favorite things we do throughout the year. It's really special. It's really intimate. We typically really scale things down and it's very acoustic and we circle the room up and we kind of refocus a lot of things. But my mom's family does Christmas on Christmas Eve, have my entire life, all I've ever known. And I never get to go because I've got places I have to be because my job says you got to be there. And I'm not mad about that, by the way. I'm not mad at my job or anything like that. It's just, how do you kind of build those relationships when the only time you can get those relationships is inside of a space and time that everybody else is busy? Like my uncle, one of my uncles, the middle child, he fixes breakfast for his entire family. He's got 4 kids. His wife passed away 7-8 years ago now. And he fixes breakfast, pancakes, bacon, sausage every Sunday morning. And his whole family shows up around 9:00 and they eat breakfast and they go to church together. And I'm going, I could never show up to that if I wanted to. Like I just don't have that bandwidth in life. And I couldn't drive the hour and a half and show up at his house and say, hey, can I come sit with you guys just on a Sunday morning one time? What can I bring kind of stuff and just come sit and hang out. And just laugh and hear stories and go worship with them and be a part of that. And I'm thankful for the calling I've got. I know you are for what God's allowed you and called you to do and things throughout the years. And I'm sure everybody listening is, but I think as the world gets busier, I don't know. And this is something that was really, really hard for me. And this is the stuff that I sit in and I wrestle with. I don't know if it's an American thing. I don't know if it's a phase of life thing. I don't know if we messed up. I don't know if decades and decades and decades ago we messed up and we stopped caring for people the way we should. My mom was at a space that she was going to need like full-time 24/7 care. And if your life is anything like mine, like I just don't have that time. And I'm being very selfish here, whether it's travel ball, whether it's going to watch my kids do this, to be a part of this, to do my job, to show up here, to show up there. It costs more to live now. So you do extra jobs and extra work. And in all of these things, and the thing I kept telling my sisters is like, look, I will restructure my life. But by the time I restructure my life to where I could go and sit with mom, because I still have to pay my bills, I still need blank number of dollars. And I mean, you can attest to the fact, I mean, Melissa and I don't live a lavish lifestyle. I mean, we do some things with our kids that are probably, we're privileged and blessed to be able to do. But I mean, we don't take $20,000 Disney vacation. We've been to Disney one time and somebody else paid for it. I mean, like I drive an 07 Chevy Uplander with 238,000 miles. I mean, it's not like we're not driving brand new cars and things like that. I mean, we live our life in a very steady space, and things. And like, I will reschedule everything, but my mom needed something that I was unable to provide. And I think that's the part in time in life when I start to look at, especially in ministry, when people need us a lot of times in those weekends and in those moments and times, ministry provides a lot of freedom with our schedules, but then it kind of ties us down. And we don't have that opportunity to go and do. And I don't know if we messed up in this world when we stopped being so available for people and our jobs became such a priority. Maybe I'm just being childish and selfish and dealing with some emotions. But anyway, those are thoughts
I think that's
that I have.
definitely a Western problem that we are too busy.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do want to applaud you on is that you did take that time. You did. You can beat yourself up and say that you wish you'd done more.
Yeah.
But your mom lived an hour and a half away.
Hour and a half away, yeah.
And you took the time. You spoke to her almost every day.
Yeah, we talked every day.
Yeah. And you saw her. You made that trip to see her very, very frequently.
Yeah.
One of the things that McKenna and I talked about last week on our PK experience show,
so excited to hear
was that you hear the story over and over and over. The statistics are, quite frankly, alarming for you and I as dads and anyone else who reads them on the amount of preachers' kids, pastors' kids who grow up and walk away from the faith. Mm-hmm. And the number one reason that you hear for that, and you and I have talked before we did the episode last week with my kids, that we would love to have preachers' kids on, that some that have flourished in their faith and others that have walked away from their faith, to talk about what was behind this. But the number one thing that you hear is that we saw mom or dad giving so much to other people's families and not to ours. And so I think that so often we can pour so much into we're always there for them. We're always there for other people's people and other people's families when other people have needs. But then when our own families have needs, so often other people's take precedence because of our job and our calling. And so I think that that's one of the things that I've always really admired about you, is the investment that you do put into your family. With all of the other demands that come in life, that's always been a priority for you. And that's something that I think that you should feel really good about in this season, that I don't think that your mom felt neglected in any way because she had a son who deeply, deeply loved and cared for her.
Well, one, thank you. And two, I think the thing that's interesting in that is, in this space, Melissa and I were able to kind of navigate and journey this and move through this because of the fact that we have chosen over the last couple of decades to live a pretty vulnerable life. And so people are very welcome at our home. People are very welcome to journey alongside and sit around our table and to be a part. And I didn't grow up in a dining room table community. I grew up in, you go to church, you come home. There's some potlucks every other month and things like that. I grew up in Sunday school classes. And my parents just they had tons of time. Life was nowhere near as busy in the 80s and 90s when I was middle school, high school age. But we didn't live dining room table, this small group, house group type of mentality. And Melissa and I had to shift and restructure and do some things. And we have constantly in 25 and a half years of marriage, we have constantly opened our home and had people in, and we have grown a lot in that in the last decade, last 10 to 15 years. We've grown quickly in that space, I think. And we love it so much. And it's because of that group of 3 and that group of 12 really kind of became something really, really intimate for us. And so I think the thing that's given me some of this space to be vulnerable in that is we've made ourselves vulnerable to people who, we didn't know them when they walked through the door. And so we've sat in and we've heard their stories and they've heard our stories, and we kind of sit in this space and we open up. And now we're in a place where we're getting to really live that out and see the community, see the body of Christ love and care in that place. And again, that's no reflection on my mom and dad. I think church was different in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And by the time we got to the 90s, they were getting older, and they were getting pretty seven. They were older than me at that, and I am now. My parents were older than me. I don't know if you've ever heard that or not. Parents are older than their kids. It's weird.
That's remarkable.
It's insane. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that, but my parents, by the time I was graduating, they're older than I am now. And they were pretty set in their ways and the style of church they wanted to be in. And so it was just different. And so I think that some of this shift in this mentality has helped a lot, but it still hasn't, for me, changed with some of the occupational things and how I sit with other people well. From an hour and a half away, it was very, very hard to be present a lot.
I want to dive into this a little bit more, because for me, I did grow up in an environment that was very open. I guess it was probably the churches that we grew up in, that some of the early adapters of the small group movement. Yep. And so my parents hosted a small group at our house. And so we every week had large groups of people coming into our home, sitting in the living room. I would take the kids and we would hang out upstairs and go outside and swim or play on the trampoline. So grew up with that community happening in our home. And then I immediately go from that experience growing up to spending the next 15, 17 years of my life working in the church environment, to where community was constantly present. So much so that my home became a retreat for me, that it became an opportunity for me to take off the pastor hat and come to a place where I didn't feel like I had to be on. I didn't have to be in that role. And there were times when I was in full-time ministry that I hosted small groups at our house, and I hated it because you're invading my safe space. And I wonder, with you having such a different experience, I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that you had breaks from full-time ministry, that you had opportunities where you were bivocational, and so you were working in a secular atmosphere. And then those times where you had sometimes periods of years where you weren't on staff at a church. And I wonder if that has anything to do. I would love to hear from some of our other listeners, maybe guys that have been in ministry for full-time vocational ministry for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, to see, am I just a closed off person or does it have something to do with that was my life for the better part of the first 30 years of my life, maybe even longer than that, when you go back to that, it was always happening in my home. Church was always happening in my home, to where it became a refuge for me from that.
And I don't know, and I'm being really, really transparent. We moved from Alabama to Virginia right as I turned 13. And so I spent like my last year of middle school and high school in Virginia. And I don't know that I could count 5 times that people were at our house that weren't aunts, uncles, cousins, that spent significant time there, that we just even hung out. They came over for dinner. We sat out on the back porch. We threw the football. Like, I can't think of 5 times ever. And you did it every weekend.
And I loved it.
Oh,
I loved it. So I'm not
yeah.
sure. I honestly don't know. I'd have to do some real deep soul searching and processing and thinking back on when that switch happened, from where I love this, come on in, I love this, to whoa. Let me shut the door.
I think something that I do well, and I will get corrected very quickly when Mel listens to this if I'm wrong. I think I compartmentalize. And so people, I'm probably a little more mellow, but I'm not a ton. Like, I've had one energy drink in my life, and it's a funny story coming back from a wedding at 4 a.m. It was during COVID. We shot this wedding in Georgia, and I drank a Hershey's energy drink. It was 2 for $5, and over a period of like 3 hours, I drank 2 of them. And like, we got home, and I was I mean, I was like, so what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? Oh, it's like 5 a.m. now. Like, what you do? I'm like, I'm going to bed. And I'm like, oh, what we do? Can we watch TV? You want to go somewhere? Like, I mean, it just, you don't want me with that type of stuff in my life. But I also can drink a cup of coffee or a Coke at 10:30 at night and go to bed, like right after I finish it. Like, it just doesn't hit me that way. But I compartmentalize pretty well. And the fact, people always look at Melissa and go, how do you deal with his energy? She's like, because he's not that guy at home. Like, when he comes home, it's a pretty, like, at times, like, almost like docile type of personality, and really calms down. And I think I do that well with, sometimes I struggle a little bit, and I'm trying to grow in this. If somebody just shows up and knocks on the door, like, I don't mind you coming. Just text me. Give me 30 seconds to go, okay, like, into my
Put
street.
some clothes on.
Well, I'm usually dressed. Yeah. I don't really run around that way, but that
would get them to leave really quick.
They would. I don't know. I mean, it could be really, really bad. I think that's the thing that's hard, is like, I don't care. You want to show up at my house kind of right off the cuff? Let's sit down, hang out, watch football. I mean, we'll do whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter to me. And we'll laugh and cut up and do the thing. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. We can sit on the back porch. We can go build a fire in the bonfire, in the fire pit outside. I mean, we'll do whatever you want to do. Oh, hey, you need to meet. The only time you can meet is 11:30 at Waffle House. We'll go eat pie and drink coffee at 11:30 at night. I don't care. And so I can compartmentalize and shut on and shut off pretty quickly in that space. And so in that, I think I'm good at that. And that could be a really bad thing, because I think I can shut on and shut off some of the other emotions as well. So when you talk about, like, hey, is there this space, how did you get here? How did, you wonder how you got to someplace. You're like going, hey, am I really just closed off? Am I hard at this? And, and I'm going, hey, on the other side of that, I can flip it on and off so quick, and I'm just okay with it. Maybe it's kind of hard. And so I think there's a balance in all these things. And I think it's a beauty of sanctification. And when we have, here's the thing I'll say is, you and I are having a genuine conversation here. And honestly, we could show people, this is like, when we say this is not even remotely.
We're supposed to be talking about finances and tithing today.
Yeah. So this is so not even what we're going to talk about. You and I are having a very just off the cuff, candid conversation, talking through some things, and we'll work, and we'll have 10 more conversations about this. If you're listening to this and you're going, I don't know, like, the thing is that you think, you could take an Enneagram test, or you do a spiritual gifts test, or whatever it is you do, you take that and you're always going to bend the rules to make you shift to where you want to. I know for a fact I can make a spiritual gifts test, make me a pastor, shepherd, leader, teacher. I can make it tell me I'm those three things. Some of that is true. I do lack mercy. I'm not the best host. I'm better at hosting. I'm better at mercy. But I think that in that space, have somebody else fill out your spiritual gifts test that knows you well. And if you don't have anybody that knows you well enough to really fill that out, that could be a problem. And that should be something where you kind of go, okay, I don't have the right relationships. If you don't have those three people in your life that could kind of go, and one of those is probably going to be your spouse if you're married. If you don't have three people in your life, though, that could go, I could fill out your Enneagram or your spiritual gifts test, and those three people land almost identical with your test, you just don't have people in your life that you're close enough to. And I think that's the thing, is that, are you willing to have these types of conversations, to hear some hard stuff, to be vulnerable in conversation? I mean, that's just like my friend I'm texting the day, like his grandfather-in-law passed away. And he and I are communicating and talking and texting. And it's just like, he always says, I just appreciate how vulnerable you are. And I'm going, well, I appreciate the same thing, because you could lie to me. And it's that space of like, I'm willing to be vulnerable because I understand that in honesty, one, you can't fight the devil in the dark. Two, inside of honesty, and Matt Chandler said that, by the way. I won't take credit for it, but you can't fight the devil in the dark. I need to be vulnerable with people so that there's accountability in my life to make me look more like Jesus.
To come full circle back to where we started on this,
excuse me.
In your experience, have you seen that that's just a problem with church culture, that we
Yes.
don't value vulnerability?
Yes.
I've always been much more vulnerable behind the pulpit than I have in front of it. And I can remember.
That's the most quotable thing you will say today. That is so good. You remember when? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go.
It's always been something that I've been very vulnerable from the stage, from behind a microphone. And I had one of my key leaders one time come up to me and say, "You've got to stop. You're way too vulnerable. You're not supposed to show that kind of vulnerability as a pastor." He was older, very wise, been a leader in many, many churches. And it floored me until I began to think that's what most people think, that as a pastor, I'm supposed to have it all together. I'm not supposed to feel. I'm not supposed to have these kind of thoughts and emotions. I'm not supposed to show vulnerability in any sort of way. And I wonder if one of the reasons why it's so hard for us to grieve, why it's so difficult, is because society, church leadership culture has taught us for so long that vulnerability in leadership is a bad thing.
Oh, absolutely. Because you can't, I mean, the understanding, the thought, the idea is that you cannot lead if people know who you are. And I actually think you can only lead if people know who you are, because people are not going to follow somebody they don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think in that space, and so the thing when I stepped up and I actually just said, I've had a couple of friends and a couple of you all who, not in a bad way, very caring about me, are like, "Man, we're surprised you're here." And I said, I'm going to be honest, maybe I wasn't smart enough to realize I shouldn't be. But I just want to say thank you for caring for me. And then I told that story about, hey, my mom's only been probably the two things she's most proud of me is being her son and being a pastor. And I feel like today the most honoring thing I can do is to be here. I was just saying, like, I don't know what this is going to look like. I know what I've got to talk about, and I feel like I'm ready for this, but I may not be. And you're going to see something. And the thing is like you said, that's behind the mic. In front of the mic, I was saying that same stuff to friends 30 minutes before, standing in circles, very private circles, having conversations, working through some things, tearing up a little bit, working through some of those emotions and some of those thoughts. In all fairness, Melissa was in much harder space. Mel was in a much worse space than I was over the last week. And she's still coming out of that fog. She feels things a lot different than I do. And so what I've done is I've let her feel that. I've not been like, all right, come on, we got to get back to life. It's been, hey, how do you need me in this space? Where do you need me at? What can I do? She did the photography for my niece's wedding the day after we buried my mom. And I think it was good for her. The photos were gorgeous. She did so good. My niece was gorgeous. That church, oh my goodness. I didn't even realize there was a church like that in the middle of nowhere, Virginia.
Lots of churches like that in middle of nowhere, Virginia.
Man, I'm telling you, this place was monstrous. They built a new sanctuary within the last 5 to 7 years, and I just hadn't seen it. And oh my goodness, it was gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And I'm just so, just so thankful for God's still working. This guy's been pastoring there. It's the guy who did my mom's funeral. He's been the pastor at this church. 40 years, 35 years, something like that. Maybe, I don't know. And he has been so faithful and so good. And God has just blessed. I tell Landon all the time, I said, you play well over a dozen instruments. He's like, yeah. And I said, the church we're going to, they have people that play every one of those instruments at 10 times the skill. And I said, now they've been playing 40 years. And I said, it's not our style of music on a Sunday. Man, they can play. And he was walking around and he kind of saw backstage at their church. And they had these $10,000 Gibson Les Pauls just laying around. And he's going, do you think? I said, yes, they would miss one if you took it. And he was joking, but he's just like, Dad, that was crazy to have that kind of, I said, buddy, and like they've earned it. But, that feeling and that stuff of that was very complicated. But I love what you said, because one, I'm with you. I'm from the fact of I am pretty vulnerable on stage, and I'll tell you my story. And I'll tell you what I'm going through. I mean, this past Easter, and I think it created some tension in our church. I don't know, maybe somebody's listening. And if they are, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not saying any names, but I think some people were just like, yeah, we're just not down for that. I mean, I talked about the fact of like, you know, I had the skull, and I talked about that Jesus lived with the end in mind. You were there Easter Sunday. And I talked about the fact of that we'd had a friend just a few days before who's several years younger than I am, that she laid down, she went to sleep and didn't wake up. And I live sometimes with this anxiety of, am I honoring the Father? Am I living with Jesus and stuff in this way? And I just don't think people love hearing that from their pastor. I think there's a lot of people who did. I think there's some that don't. And if you want somebody that's going to stand up and bring you a message, today we're going to bring you a word from 1 Samuel chapter 7. That's not me.
That was really good.
Thank you. I grew up in that world. And I'm thankful. And by the way, I'm super thankful for that. I do not begrudge 1 ounce of my church theological upbringing at all. I wish there's things I would have matured in more quickly, but don't we all? Good gracious, don't we all? And but I'm not that guy. There's 82 other churches in Unicoi County. Most of them are bringing you a word of the Lord from 1 Samuel. I am praying for those churches. Go hang out with them. It's okay. We can still have lunch together. I can support your business. You can support my family. We can still love and care for and do, but you're never going to really grow just sitting and me going, here's 7 things, God's blessings in a U-Haul kind of mentality of preaching, if that's not who I am. But somebody who really does that, and that's who they are, God uses that. And I love the vulnerability. Good gracious, that became a really hard word for me to say.
Spell that.
VULNERABILITYEZQ.
Nailed it.
So anyway, I think we flesh things out and go through things that way. I love sitting in a community and sitting pretty raw and open. Most of the people who attend our small group that Melissa and I lead right now come because our kids aren't in prison. And they're like, we're pretty young couples and we're going to have kids, or we have young kids, and your kids seem to be nice. And so we come because of that. And that's why they showed up. And then we have invested and cared, and I think it's moved further down the road in those relationships. But we get to be, parent-ish to some of these people and things. And so anyway, but yeah.
It's really good stuff.
I love this conversation. Super thankful for you. Super thankful for Amanda and what she's done for Melissa. You guys are definitely, for both of us, inside of our 3. You for me, Amanda for Melissa, and as a couple, if we have a couple 3, you and Amanda are in that group. And and I just think if people don't have that, they don't realize how special it is. I mean, the fact that I can call and text and do things. And you literally cleared your schedule for 2 days and said, I'm here for you. Anytime these 2 days, you just let me know. And you cleared your schedule. And I said, hey, so unfortunately, here's where I'm at. And you weren't upset or mad or anything about that. I mean, you went on, but you texted me and you checked in. And so I did kind of have to get back to work and do a couple of things. But honestly, most of that work for those days, I sat at a coffee shop, I drank coffee, had a friend, another guy I work with, who came in, and we usually meet once a week, and we just sat and told stories. It wasn't anything. We talked about ministry and stuff some, because that's just our life, but we just sat and told stories. And somebody is listening to this, with the several hundred people who listen to this thing, somebody's going through what you and what I'm going through now, what you and I have gone through in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, they've had that happen within the last month. Man, I don't wish this on anybody. It's not fun. But they may have something coming up soon that, whether it's like your dad or like, my mom and dad weren't expected, but they weren't doing well. And so it wasn't a shock. With your dad, it was an absolute, like, getting hit by a bus type thing. I mean, no clue. And so, I just think it's a space of find your people, sit with them, and
So last thing I want to discuss really quick, and I think that there are a lot of listeners out there who are sitting here and they say that's great for you guys. I don't have anyone. Ministry, we've talked about this at length, that they've been so lonely, and there are guys out there maybe sitting right now that saying, I'm going through this right now, and I don't have that person that I feel like I can call, ask to come play a round of golf or sit down at a coffee shop, and that I can be open and vulnerable with my feelings with, and know that they're not going to judge me, know that they're not going to hold it against me later on, or know that even they're going to show up and be there. What would you say to those people?
Man, that is so hard, because, it's really tough. I was about to say, when you started talking, and this is one of those moments where I wasn't trying to guess ahead, but I could tell where you were heading with this.
I mean, statistics say that 70% of people in full-time ministry would say they have no close personal friends. 7 out of 10.
So I talked about community this past week, and U.S. News and World Report back in January did this whole thing and talking about people who lonely, the antonym of community is loneliness. It's isolation. And I think that's what's tough, is even the CDC and people who are just putting blanket things out, everything they give is find a community, find people. If you're trying to combat loneliness, going and sitting, and I've said this before, and I said this on Sunday, a lot of people retreat to Netflix and things. And the reality is this, it's like, I still have not turned on the Friends TV show since Matthew Perry died, because I just resonated with his character. I was Monica over Rachel. I loved his character, the comedy, the things, it was just this whole thing. And we invited people into our lives, but one of the largest streaming services out there, their CEO a few years ago said that we know the content we make shapes culture, and we will continue to make content until culture reflects what we think it should.
Wow.
And so we move our lives into this space of we're letting culture shape us, and then we wonder why we're lonely. The thing I was thinking is, I just don't trust I was going to say I don't trust pastors a lot, but I could go down a list of 2 or 3 guys, pastors, not in my church, that I would literally I'd hand them my bank account if they wanted it. And these guys have texted me and I'm air quoting, they're the competition. And they're these guys that are serving faithfully and out there, and that I actually recommend, especially one of them, he's Reformed. And I recommend people to his church. They show up and they go, we're a touch more, I was like, Presbyterian. I'm like, I got your guy. And I send them to his church, because I'm like, if I wasn't pastoring, I would go to his church. One of the best Bible teachers I've ever been around. Love him. And these guys reach out and they care and they do. But it's very hard to trust pastors sometimes, because I've got a few pastors. I wouldn't tell them what street I live on. Definitely wouldn't give them my social security number, my bank account. And I think it's the same thing with people in your church. It takes time, but until you start to have coffee with somebody, you're not going to be able to find people. And if you're constantly in fear that everyone you talk to is going to burn you to the ground, you're never going to build those relationships. And I also think
if you're also in the mentoring role and not the mentoree role, if you're always the one who's taking that leadership role, and everyone that you're having coffee with, you're the one providing life advice and direction to them, and you don't have anyone in your life who's stepping in and providing that to you. Every mentor needs a mentor.
I remember the first guy I had, so that's not fair. I've had so many people who've invested in my life throughout the years, but the first guy that I went to and intentionally said, hey, would you sit with me? I'm 49. He's in his mid 80s, 48. Sorry. I'll be 49 this year. He's in his mid 80s. And it was 20 years ago. And he was a retired pastor from South Africa who was attending our church. I kind of met him. We were doing this Narnia series at the church I was on staff at. I was a youth pastor at this church, and he read the portions of C.S. Lewis because his accent was so awesome. And he's a pastor and he's an orator. And I mean, he's just a great communicator. And I went to him one day and I said, would you be willing to have coffee with me? And we started sitting at a local Starbucks this was back before really a lot of bougie local coffee shops were around. And we just started sitting at the local Starbucks and we started opening up the scriptures, opening up things by like Nancy Pearcey. We read some things by like Brian McLaren and stuff like that pushed my thinking. That I still don't agree with a lot of Brian McLaren's thoughts, but it pushed my thinking and we navigated and worked through. And it just started with, you're 20 years older than me, 40 years older than me. Would you be willing to sit? Because the thing that I would say is that at the end of the day, we need to look at who's the person who's faithfully served and lived life and been in this space for, 60, 70, 80 years. And they're at the end of the table with a pile of people around them. Don't go look for somebody who's isolated and sitting by themselves and going, they need a friend. Let's be friends for each other. Find somebody who naturally pulls people around them and see if you can join their party. And because that's somebody you can trust, because that's somebody who has earned the trust of everybody you see sitting around the table. And guys like that, and I was going to say, that's somebody that I try to be. I was going to say it's somebody I am, but I think it's somebody I try to be. People like that, and it's because those people have invested in me. We tend to be people that always have room at the table. And I love that space.
If you want to know more about this, we did 1 or 2 episodes. Go back and look up our episode on Tribe of Mentors. I think that if that's something that you're struggling with, something that you would like to know more about, we dive really deep into that on a past episode of our show, Tribe of Mentors. Check that out. All right. Well, we filled a whole episode that I have no idea what we're going to call this episode, what category this is going to fall into. We kind of jumped all around and circled back to where we began. But I want to thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for opening up and sharing some of the things that you've been through over the course of the last week. Know that it's been a difficult week, and want to say to our listeners out there, if you're going through a difficult time and you don't have someone that you can reach out to, someone who's reaching out to you, you can always call us. We'll be a voice, we'll be an ear to listen, and be a shoulder to lean onto. You can find us at higherministries.com. Find us on Facebook, join the conversation. And maybe next week we will dive into church finances and tithing and all of that. But hopefully this meant something for someone. If nothing else, I think it was good for Robert and I to have this discussion with each other here today. So thanks for listening to the Small Church Podcast. Hope that you have a great rest of your week, and please tune in next week. Thanks.